Forever's Now Talk series. I now present to you Laurent of Centre Pompidou.
Thank you so much for your invitation. I didn't know exactly what was the time slot, so I did it. So it begins to. I will make it in 4 hours time. If you have plenty of time, it will be nice because we are so many in this wonderful place that there will be, after the 4 hours lecture, a time for questions. Let's go to the night, and after the jazz festival, I think it will make a good connection. I would like to thank Art d'Egypte, the American University, and of course the French Embassy for this invitation. It will not be very formal, I will apologize for that. The main quality to become a president of an institution in France is to not know how to speak English, so I'm quite good at that. So I'm sorry, but I will do my best for this lecture this afternoon. To make it short, I choose some images because if you are fed up with my speech, you can watch the images, a choice during my lifetime about museums. I'm doing this job for now 30 years old, and it's quite an honor to be in this wonderful place to make a short summary of my life. First of all, I want to say hello, good afternoon with this image, which is a garden dwarf. I know nothing about museum, but I'm a quite good nanologist. It's the name in French to say a specialist of garden gnomes. I begin 30 years old, and in this image I choose a garden dwarf to say hello to everyone. And in this one, it's a branch of the nanology, which is the how can garden dwarfs make children? Because it's a big problem, because you have many male garden gnomes, but not so many female. So there is a strange discovery how to make children in the world of garden gnomes. My hypothesis in this show 20 years ago was a Chtonian discovery. It means that the garden gnomes comes from the earth, from the center of the earth. And I like this image also because there is a link with the world of museum. I think we all want the museum not to be like a garden gnome. I mean, we want them to have a personality. We don't want them to be the same as the other. 7 years ago, I was in charge of a monographic museum. You have some kind of them in Cairo, like the Mahmoud Mokhtar Museum or the Hayden Enel Museum. It's always difficult to do a monographic museum, to run a monographic museum, because you have always the problem that the museum can become a mausoleum, a tomb, like an Egyptian tomb. I was in charge of one of the most famous artists, quite controversial at the moment, Picasso. Picasso was born in 1881. His self-portrait is at the age of 20, and this painting is 1 year before his death. In between these two paintings, he did 60,000 works, and this is the first work which was acquired by a public French institution, and it was bought 50 years after his birth. Why I am beginning with this small observation? It's because for a public institution it's always very difficult to acquire a work of art, and we are always late. That's always a problem for a public institution. Another images which is very interesting in the world of the Picasso is a view of one of his house. It seems to be disorder, but Picasso says that everything has a meaning. And so now everybody, be ready. You will have on the next image the job of a curator. So before and after, before and after, before and after. As you can see, there is a lack of the feeling of the home of Picasso in the tribute of a curator to Pablo Picasso. Here we are on the first big retrospective after his death. And as you see, it's always difficult for a museum, and you have many examples in Cairo. I was yesterday in the Museum of Modern Art, which has a fantastic collection, but you have the same spirit of this image, where you want to feel in the air the spirit of the studios, of the artists, but there is a kind of lack of this spirit. One of the locations of the Musée Picasso could have been this wonderful castle, which is next to the Sainte-Victoire mountain, you know, the one of Cézanne. Very soon at the Allen auction there will be one mountain of Paul Cézanne which will be on auction. But finally it was impossible to transform these castles in a museum. Another possibility, another opportunity is quite interesting if you have been to Paris quite recently. It's the Bourse de Commerce, which now houses the Pinault collection, one of the most important private collections in France. But nobody knows that the first idea for this building was to house the Picasso Museum. Finally, the family and the state chose this Hôtel Particulier from the 17th century, right in the center of the Marais, historical district, by the way, really next to the Centre Pompidou, 500 meters. Unfortunately, Picasso didn't live in this building, but Picasso was very classic in his feeling about architecture, so it's interesting to have this quite a contrast between someone who was very at the avant-garde in all of the fields and very classic in his taste. A monographic museum could be like this. It's the fantastic Musée Gustave Moreau in the center of Paris. But it's really the kind of monographic museum which are like a tomb. As you can see, you can't move anything. You have another opportunity, and I want to make a specific tribute this afternoon because recently our major French painter Pierre Soulages died at the age of 102. After tomorrow, the President de la République, Emmanuel Macron, will do a national tribute. It will be the fourth time in the French history that a French artist has a national tribute in Le Louvre, in the heart of the National Museum. But before his death, Pierre Soulages decided to have his monographic museum. But one thing which was very interesting, he said, I don't want my museum to be like a tomb. So he asked Spanish architect Orsier to do this building. And inside you have the donation of Pierre Soulages, but which is very interesting is the policy of the museum, which is very open to many other artists. When you are in charge of a monographic museum, you can have many, of course, opportunities, many views on the collection. I give you some examples. For example, this one, Picasso 1932, we try to be inside 1 year of the life of the artist from the 1st of January till the 31st of December, with the idea to hang paintings day by day. For example, here on the right side of the image, you have a painting of the 22 of January, and on the left side, you have the famous dream of the 24th of January. As you can see, 2 days in between, you have a very complete transformation of his style and a very different way to describe his relationship to, on the right side, Olga, and on the left side, Marie-Thérèse. Another idea which is now quite a fashion in the world of museum is trying to make duography, both graphic comparison. For example, here Picasso and Rodin. Here is in the main staircase of the Musée Picasso. On the ground floor, you have the figure of Rodin, and on the first floor, the second floor, American way, you have the fantastic dreamer of Picasso, La Lectrice. And in this kind of comparison, people like them very much because you can go really, really deeply in the differences between two artists and the influences. As I said in my introduction, I want to be like in a zapping zone this afternoon and trying to go from another institution to from an institution to another. And for now, more than 1 year, I'm in charge of the Centre Pompidou. The Centre Pompidou was built in 1977 by two architects, Renzo Piano and Richard Rogers. Many people know this image, but I like this one, which is the rear facade, on back side, and I think it's as strong as the main facade. And as you can see, even if at the beginning the Centre Pompidou was very criticized, I think the Centre Pompidou is really now like a classic building, becoming a monument, and something very special in this monument, because as Piano and Rogers wanted to create, you have floor without any pillars, any columns, completely open, 7,500 square meters each floor, and a mix of functions. Of course, now it's very common, but at that time it was really something new. Some people called it a supermarket for the culture. On the first floors, the second and the third one, you have the most important public library in our country. You have here an image. And on the other floors, you have the museum. And the thing which seems to be quite fantastic still now in our country, it's this view, because the building is above the legal height of the urbanism in Paris, and you can have a fantastic view of all the monuments. And as you can see on the right side, you have the Bourse de Commerce from François Pinault, which I just mentioned. Today we face the challenge for the Centre Pompidou because we have to close for 5 years. We are beginning the closing time at the end of 2024 after the Olympics, and of course we will have a technical project removing all the difficulties of security, air conditioning and things like that, but of course we will use this period to try to transform the Centre Pompidou in another utopia. And I like this image, which is an iceberg, and for us the main thing will not to change anything of the building, but trying to use what is here but nobody sees. And what do we have? We have parking lots. And as you know, as in many cities in the world, the mayor of Paris wants to get rid of the cars inside of the town. And for us, it's a huge opportunity because we can use 20,000 square meters. And so, if I had the opportunity to do this lecture 20 years ago, perhaps I will have chosen a project with a new wing or a new building, like, for example, a Grand Egyptian Museum. But in France, we don't have enough money to do that. And so we have to use what we have, and mainly the parking lots to do the next filling of our institution. The fact that we have completely open space for every show creates the opportunity, to have a specific scenography for every exhibition. It's something which seems now quite strange because, of course, in a world of sustainability, we try to use the scenography for many shows, but it gives us a test of something different. And for example, I give you this exhibition, Dada, which I curated 15 years ago, with the idea of a grid where you enter and you can go in every rooms, like in a labyrinth, like in a chess game, and which makes the thing quite interesting. I give you here an image, for example, which I think was completely in the spirit of the Dada movement, and at the end of the show, you have the open space towards the view of Paris. My last show at the Centre Pompidou 15 years ago, as a curator, I was asked to quit the Centre Pompidou after this show because it was a show about emptiness, about voids. And I said to my boss, I will do a show about voids, but don't worry, it will cost anything. But the fact was quite different because at the end of the show, people come in every empty rooms. It was a retrospective of all the exhibition dedicated to emptiness in the 20th century. And very strangely, but like in 1961, when Yves Klein did the first show dedicated to emptiness, they come with pens and they mark on the wall a sheet, we don't want to pay for this exhibition and as you know, perhaps in some museums, you have specific paintings for the walls, and so it costs a huge amount of money to paint again all the walls. So I was fired the Centre Pompidou at that time. Voilà. I come back now, and which one thing which is quite interesting in our context is how to use what I can call a brand. A name, Centre Pompidou, and trying to do another adventure. For example, here we are in Brussels, and in 2 years in Belgium, we are going to open a new Centre Pompidou in a former garage from the 20s called Canal Centre Pompidou. Here, next to Manhattan, we are going to open in 3 years a new Centre Pompidou also in an historic building from 1911 with the architect Rem Koolhaas. And of course, we are really in the spirit of the Guggenheim adventure, but in another way. As you remember, after the Guggenheim New York, the Guggenheim tried to make something new with the fantastic Guggenheim Bilbao by Frank Gehry, and this part, which is dedicated to the American sculptor Richard Serra, like a monographic museum inside the Guggenheim. But I think 3 dates are quite important. 1977, Centre Pompidou, 1997, the Guggenheim Bilbao, and 2017, the Louvre Abu Dhabi, which is not so far from here, which is perhaps one of the last symbols of this, what I will call, I don't know if there is the same expression in English, but the big white elephants, the big white whales. I think now we are in a period that we want to get rid of these huge monuments, and the Louvre Abu Dhabi is one of the last of them, which was built by Jean Nouvel. And at the same time, the same architect, Jean Nouvel, did in Doha, in Qatar, the National Museum. So you can make a comparison between the dome of Jean Nouvel and the fantastic Saint Rose of the Qatari National Museum. This is an inside view of the Louvre Abu Dhabi. As you know, perhaps there is a mix between loans from national institutions from France and from acquisition from the Emirates, with a mix of half-half, with the idea to try to do a universal museum. For example, as you can see on this image, you have, of course, a statue from your country, and on the rear side, Greek and Roman artifacts. If I go further in this kind of comparison, sometimes you have things which are very strange. I wanted to show you one example in Mexico City. As you know, Mexico City, like Cairo, is a very small city, and so you don't have so much space to do museum. And we have a nice example with this museum built by Carlos Slim, the fourth billionaires, which is in the idea of the Guggenheim. And as you can see it on the right side, you see the facade. And just 200 meters in this small city, you have another billionaires who made another museum, Romex, with the star of the time of the architecture, the British architect David Chipperfield. He's the one who did the renovation of the Neues Museum with this head quite well known in your country, with all the debates about the restitution or not, or even the debates about fake, because as you know, still today some people think that it's a fake. Of course, it's not my position. I think we are fed up with this kind of adventures, and we want really to have a new kind of spirit, a new type of experience when we visit a museum. And I would like to show you some examples, like this one in Naoshima. in Japan, where you have really a link between nature and art. The idea is not to come to visit a building like a temple, but to have a really experience. For example, this is one of the small pavilions where there is a work from Reinato. As you can see just here, sorry, my image is not so good. You have here a small part of water, and the work of the artist is only to do a sculpture with water and wind, and of course light and sun. One of the most famous examples in this kind of museum is in Hobart, in Tasmania. Before the idea of the collector Don Walsh, nobody knows where was Tasmania and Hobart in the world of museum, and now he built this fantastic museum of 20,000 square meters underground. As you know, perhaps, now more than 300,000 people come every year to visit this fantastic moment in Tasmania. But perhaps my favorite, which today seems quite relevant, is next to Düsseldorf, in a small city, and it's called Inselhombroich. It was done by a German collector in a former NATO slot. He transformed it in a park, and you have several buildings inside the park. And when you enter every building, you have many things that you never saw in the museum. You have no guards, no labels, no electricity, no doors, no air conditioning. So the museum opened with the sunrise and closed with the sunset. And at the end of the tour, you are offered a meal with your ticket, and the meal is cooked with everything you saw around you in the park. And I think this museum is really for us a kind of dream, of a moment where you have a complete recipe of everything possible, and which we can admire in an adventure and an experience in a museum. To come back to France, I would like to show you some example of decentralization, what we call decentralization, because as in your country, many things are focused to Paris, like here to Cairo, but we try to have other adventures, and for example, this one in Lens, north of Paris, which was done by the Japanese architect Sana, and you have this fantastic moment called the Time Gallery, where you go from, by the way, ancient Egypt till today in a single gallery of 300 meters long and without any walls, and you can have a feeling of going through art history without any walls, without any sectors, any bunkers, like for example in the Louvre in Paris, where we have some departments, painting departments, sculpture departments, drawing departments, and sometimes they don't speak together. In the same idea, I was in charge of the Centre Pompidou in Metz, which is east of France, which was done by the Japanese architect Shigeru Ban, with this fantastic roof in wood, and quite fantastic during the night. And we tried in this building to have the more excellent galleries, because as you know, sometimes the architecture, the outside architecture of your museum is fantastic, but the inside one is not so good. And we have to be very, very careful of that. And so we spend a lot of time, a huge amount of time, trying to have the most interesting galleries in lighting and in air conditioning. For example, on the floor, as you can see, you see nothing, but the floor, you have 1 million holes in the floor, and you can divide it in whatever form you want. You will have the same air conditioning condition, I mean temperature and hygrometry. And you don't have these awful grids you have so many times in museum, like at the Tate or many other examples. So we decided to open the museum with a show about the question of what is a masterpiece today. This is some example. And here a tribute to André Malraux, who used to be our Ministry of Culture in the 60s, and wrote a book about the Imaginary Museum, which is one of the first museums, very influential, very essential for the idea of the Universal Museum, trying to make a mix in the civilization, as you can see in this wall. In this kind of building, you can do some examples of shows which are not so classic. For example, here it's a show dedicated to the year 1917, so right in the First World War, where you have a relationship between Brancusi, who made this wonderful sculpture, Princess X, which is looking at a huge wall, one of the most magnificent collection of trench art. What does trench art is? It's the art that soldiers made in the trenches during the conflict, and it's most, I think, for French, German people, they collect it. It's one of the most fantastic examples of popular works of art, of course, but with a connection with memory, nostalgia, melancholy, which is fantastic. And in this kind of room, you have this comparison between a very classic sculpture like Brancusi, if I can say classic, and this world of popular art. Another example was the show dedicated to what we call forme simple in French. It means during all the art history, from the prehistoric ages till today, how the artists deal with geometric shapes and are very, very dedicated to this sensation of unity. You have here an example of an images. And I want to finish with this image before answering your question. When we do this kind of job, of course, we want to have the most important time dedicated to the public. And sometimes you have nice moments. And for example, here in Metz, for a show dedicated to Sol Lewitt, we transform the mediation part of our job. And during 1 year, we asked a classroom of young students from the age of 8 or 9. If for most of them it was the first visit to a museum, and we asked them to become the guides of the exhibition, as you can see on the left part. And so at the end of the school year, they were able to make the first lecture in an exhibition. But as you can see on the right part of the image, the public is very specific. It's elderly people, who for most of them perhaps it will be their last visit to a museum. And so when you have sometimes this opportunity to make this connection between the young generation and the older one, I think perhaps we have the feeling to do a nation. Thank you so much for your attention. Sorry, I was quite fast, but I wanted not to be in a 4-hour slot of a lecture. You want mine?
Thank you for this whirlwind tour. It's so interesting. There's so many stops I would like to stop at. If you don't mind, I have several questions actually. So did you say in the beginning that you were before Pompidou you were the director of the Picasso Museum in Paris?
Yes.
Did I understand this correctly?
There are many Picasso museums in the world. The one I was in charge is the National Museum of Picasso. It's interesting because I don't know if the law exists in Egypt. It exists in some countries. In France, when you have to pay taxes, you can pay them with works of art. It's called dation. It's not donation, it's called dation. And it's a very specific law, which exists now for 50 years. And one of the first examples was when Picasso died in 1973. The family, instead of paying taxes, decided to give part of the heritage to the state. And as you know, Picasso, around 20-25, was very wealthy. And so it's very strange, but as you remember in the image I showed, he kept many things. And he kept sometimes the most interesting works. He didn't want to sell them. So that's why when we open the houses when he died, there is a link with Egypt, because people say it was like the discovery of Tutankhamun, like in 1922. And they say, well, normally when an artist died, he has nothing or not so many things in his studio. And here it was like a fantastic discovery. And very often, paintings and sculptures which were never displayed. And so 25% of this heritage becomes the national collection, and I was in charge of this museum. I was the 5th director from 2014 till 2021. Others are in Barcelona, in Spain, in Antibes, south of France, in Malaga, where Picasso was born, in Japan, in Münster, Germany. So it was not your question?
Yes, no, this is exactly my question. Is this the museum that was, it spent some time closed and then recently reopened after the building was renovated?
Yes, so the Dation was accepted by the state in 1979, and the museum opened in 1985. And after 30 years, there was some problems of security and air conditioning, and it was closed from 2010 to 2014. And I was appointed just at the end of the renovation part.
Okay,
so I'm quite a specialist now of closing and opening a museum. Voilà.
That's very interesting. I had the pleasure to visit that museum. That's why I was curious after the opening, the reopening, and it's really an amazing place. So
thank you.
You did a great job. Can I ask a few more questions? Give space to others. The image you showed of another museum, it went so fast. The one where you said people can eat a meal with the things that they saw. Can you explain that more? Which museum is that?
Yes, it's this museum. So it's not far from the city of Düsseldorf in Germany. It's a private museum. And the collector, Mr. Müller, who died quite recently, had this dream to do something different in the world of museum. And he wanted something, but well before all the debates of today, something really ecological. So he said, we will use no air conditioning, we will use no artificial lighting, we will use no guards. And as you can see in this image, you can go from the nature to the art and to the art from the nature without any doors. And perhaps we can have a debate because it's more complicated in terms of mediation, but as you can see, for example, you have two works of the French artist Yves Klein on the left part, and there are no labels. So he said people have to discover by themselves. And at the end, you have a restaurant, like in many museums, but you don't have to pay. You are offered a meal, the meal of the day, and the meal is included in the ticket, and it's done with what is cultivated around the museum. Voilà. It's a nice adventure.
Just the last question. There was one image you showed of a different type of curatorial display where it's not room-based, it's a large open space.
This one?
Yeah, I think this one. We have a museum in Cairo that recently opened called the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. I don't know if you saw that one in Fustat, where the mummies were recently moved
Yes,
from.
the core collection of the National Museum of the Civilization, I think it's a little bit influenced by this thing, but the main difference, I think, it's that in the core museum, which is interesting by the way, you can do either way. You can do on the left or on the right. So if you are not completely aware of the art history, you can begin by the modern or the contemporary part and then finish by the prehistoric part. But I think it's interesting. Here it's more in a classic French way because you begin, as you can see, by Egypt, Mesopotamia, and you go on a line till the contemporary moment. If I'm more precise, for the first show, because we are French, sorry about that, the last painting was Delacroix, de Liberté, La Liberté guidant le peuple. It changed, and you have another room behind this wall, which is dedicated to contemporary art. So it's not very big, but I think it's one of the few examples in the world where you can have a very superficial but very interesting promenade through the art history. Some people call it the first museum of the 2.0 age because you can visit the gallery like if you are in front of your computer because every work is like this.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, what about the Louvre? Are there any renovations concerning the Louvre Museum?
At the Louvre?
Yeah,
Is there any renovation?
yeah.
Yes, I'm not in charge of the Louvre, but my colleague Laurent, who was appointed 1 year ago in the French National Museum, it's by chance because it was not decided by the government, but thanks to a moment of generation, there are many national positions which were changed. And I arrived at the Centre Pompidou at the same time of my colleague at the Quai Branly and the others at the Musée d'Orsay and my colleague at the Louvre. And so Laurence is the first woman to be the director of the Louvre. And so of course she has many projects. One of them is to create, and now it's done, the 8th department. There used to be 7 departments, and the 8th one, which is quite interesting in this country, is dedicated to Christianity of Orient, to the Coptic world and things like that. So it will be interesting to see what will be this new department. Because as you know, for example, in the collection of the Louvre, you have part of the monastery of Bawit, which are in the collection. And the Louvre is so big that you have renovation and things every year. Normally, next year we are going to open again the decorative arts department, a new one, a new wing, and it's still a secret. But it seems that Laurence Descartes wants to have a new entrance. As you know, especially in this country, the entrance of the Louvre is the pyramid, because our President de la République used to love Egypt. It was his favorite destination. He has a fascination for Egypt, and Yao Ming-pei, the architect, decided to do the entrance like a pyramid. But it's a fantastic entrance, but it has the same problem that Van Cheops, Kefren and Mykonos, that the entrance is not so big if you want to go inside. So when you have 10 million people a year who want to go inside the Louvre, it's like if you want to go inside Cheops, you have to make a queue. So the idea is to do a new entrance. Voilà. So normally there will be a new entrance within the next 5 years. Voilà. That's her main project.
I have a question. You told us about the construction work at Centre Pompidou and the plan of having a new part of this museum, both in Java City and in Brussels. But what will happen within Paris? Do you plan of having some other places during the construction work in France?
When the museum closes, of course, you have many opportunities. One of the easiest one is to do nothing, which is a good idea, but because you have many things to do that you can't do when the museum is open. But our idea is to do many things, but outside the museum and not only inside. I mean, inside the storage and things like that. So I think there will be 3 levels around Paris. We will have a new conservation center in south of Paris, in a city called Massy, where we will have new facilities, because as you know today in the world of museum, the storage part is one of the most important ones. And we will have partnership with all our colleagues, the Louvre, the Musée d'Orsay, where we will display part of the collection. And another idea is to have a specific place, not too big, between 1,000 and 2,000 square meters exhibition space, where we can do our own exhibition program. In France, we will have many partnerships with other museums. We are used to have, we are in partnership like in Lille, Rouen, Nice, many cities of Paris. And of course, all around the world, with all our friends, and especially in this country, all the people who want to work with us, we will be very pleased to be in partnership. Not in an idea from top to bottom, more in an exchange, and sometimes it could be only one work of art which could travel, it could be very interesting. And of course we are open to every opportunity starting 2025.
Can I ask another question?
I think so.
Regarding the museum you showed us near Düsseldorf, the one with the mill that we talked about, you said there was like no labels and no mediation, but don't you think it just like causes the fact that only an elite comes to this museum? Like
yes, you're completely right. I was when I showed the image, I said that of course only a private collector can do that. I think in a public institution it's more difficult. But for example, if you go in a museum not so far from here, sometimes you have difficulties to find the labels, but you have some pleasure. So it's life. So sometimes it's nice to have a label, but it's a huge amount of time to do right and good labels. I think one of the most difficult parts of our job in art history is to write short text about works of art. You can write 3,000 pages about Mona Lisa, and perhaps 5,000 and 10,000, but to write 2 or 3 lines for everyone about Mona Lisa, it's quite a challenge.
Thank you.
Well, if there is no question, thank you so much again for your invitation, and I hope that you will have the opportunity to come to Paris, and if not, to have many partnerships between America, Egypt, and France. Thank you so much.